hey there, and welcome back to the freewheeling Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. I say freewheeling because you never know what the format is going to be here. And you know what, I'm just kind of thinking I'm going to make that more of a theme here, and I'm going to have some fun with this. I'm going to try to anyway, over the next few days. Let's see how that goes. But yeah, sometimes it's 2 segments, sometimes it's 1 segment, sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 33 minutes. You never know what you're going to get here, okay? It's like the Forrest Gump box of chocolates podcast and YouTube channel. But it is the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. Sometimes I call it the Showing Up to Your Life, and sometimes I call it more appropriately, as it's named on the social media platforms, Showing Up to Life. And so it is what it is. And that's what this is all about, right? Because that's what mindfulness is, right? Mindfulness is accepting, as the Buddhists call, the suchness of life, right? That everything is as it is. That doesn't mean that we have to, live with things the way they are. We can change things. We can grow. We can evolve. We can heal. We can effect positive and necessary and significant changes in our lives. But we can only do that most effectively from the place of accepting the suchness as it is first. And that's just the way it goes, folks. All right, I know that seems maybe counterintuitive to some of you. I know it seemed counterintuitive to me for so long. Like, what do you mean accept? No, I have to work, I have to fight, I have to wrestle it into submission. Like, I want what I want. Pounding my chest like a gorilla for all you on the podcast. You didn't miss anything, trust me. But the idea here is that, when we get to that point of, no, I don't want things to be this way, right? What we're doing then is we're creating an emotional response. This is what we talked about yesterday, right? In that moment of saying, no, things can't be the way they are. I do not accept it. That's triggering your stress response. It's, because really you're afraid. You don't want it to be to such an extent that it's fear. Right? And that emotion of fear is going to cause the system, the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, to jump into action. And in that place of jumping into action, you can no longer connect to the people or experiences around you. You can no longer show up for your life. And that's what we talked about yesterday. I want to take that theme and that sort of idea and concept a little further today, okay? And specifically, I want to talk about this in the context, of forgiveness, okay? Because really, as I see it, forgiveness is really just the ultimate form of acceptance, right? It's the most radical acceptance there is, right? Because ultimately, that's what it is, right? Forgiveness is ultimately just accepting whatever somebody did, whether it's yourself or somebody else or, whoever it is that you need to, that you're contemplating forgiveness, right? The idea is just accepting the reality of what has happened, right? Now, again, that doesn't mean that you give them a license to do it again. It doesn't mean that you say, oh, well, I guess nothing will ever be better for me. Okay, just like accepting a traffic jam, right? You're not, accepting a traffic jam does not mean that you don't try to get off on the next exit to get somewhere faster, right? But accepting the traffic jam means not, banging on the steering wheel and saying, God, why me, why me, why me? Because in that moment of that noise in your mind, you're not going to see the potential solutions. Because remember, those potential solutions are right here in the present moment, where everything happens. And that's why it's so important for us to attend to that present moment. And as I illustrated to you yesterday, and I hope you remember, that when we get into this place of dysregulation, which comes from not accepting, right? That's when we are no longer available. And it's really the way the autonomic nervous system works, just a little scientific research review here. Let's take the most recent The most recent research on the autonomic nervous system is certainly the Polyvagal Theory, right? Which is a few years ago, a guy by the name of Dr. Stephen Porges developed this polyvagal theory, right? Which is to say that our autonomic nervous system, right, which is the part of your nervous system that is referred to as fight or flight, right, or rest and digest is the other side, or it's fight, flight, freeze, or faint, and then rest and digest. And so that's a hierarchical thing. So we start at the rest and digest when we're regulated, right? That's when we're in a place where, we are, as Dr. Porges talks about it, he says that is the social engagement level of our autonomic nervous system, which is to say that that is the time when we are able to connect to other people around us, or cats and dogs, or connect to ourselves, right? Oh gosh, I just realized that oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That I'm not going to re-record, but hopefully you heard everything. I'm very sorry about that. But anyway, the social engagement aspect or mode of our relationship, of our nervous system, right, is that place where we can relate and connect to each other. That is where we are showing up to life, right? In that social engagement, that's when we are grounded, that's when we are available, that's when we are open, that's when we are ready to engage, right? And so from this place where that's the sort of baseline where we all belong, right? But from that place now, a stressor comes in, right? Something that triggers our stress response, right? Now, the first stage of your stress response is going to be that fight or flight, right? You get into that tense. Now, and what happens in fight or flight is the blood from your viscera just goes out to your extremities. Okay, so all the organs and stuff, they are not functioning properly at that moment, right? And all of your resources are going to the big muscles of your arms, your legs, and your back to help you fight or flee, right? Now, once we determine that there is no way for us to escape a given situation or to fight our way out of a given situation, then the vagus nerve, goes to its next level, right? So you go from social engagement, which is also called rest, digest, and reproduce. You know what that means, folks. Social engagement on the highest level, right? So you go from that mode, and then we go to fight or flight, and then we go to faint or freeze, right? Which is to say that when we get to that place where we don't feel like we can fight our way out of this or run away from it, we freeze or we faint, right? And now a possum has a perfect built-in mechanism for this, right? They literally go to that third place and they literally pass themselves out, right? We don't have that mechanism. So for us, it looks like depression, or it looks like, frozen in fear, right? Like that deer in the headlights feeling, right? So then the objective part of me is that we want to try to stay in that social engagement mode as much as possible, right? Now the stress, right, the fight or flight and the faint, they're perfectly natural responses. And there's nothing inherently wrong with them, right? They are our survival. And we would not be here. I would not be here talking to you if it were not for this system that we have. Okay. The question is, how much of that system is, how much of our time are we spending in that appropriate system of rest, digest, reproduce, social engagement, right? That's where we can interact with our lives. So every minute that we're spending outside of that social engagement mode of our polyvagal system, well, we're not here. We're not available. We're not available to our kids. We're not available to our partners. We're not available to our business. We're not available to our pizza with pepperoni on it. We're not available to our guitar, our grandfather's paintings, our books, our friends, our candles, our podcasts. We're not available for any of it because we're in a place of survival. And the same way that I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about a doctor in New Orleans who found that patients who refused to forgive people who caused their burns, they were in the burn ward, that these people had to have 4-to-1 skin grafts.
Because your body cannot heal when it's in the state of stress. It just can't. Remember, all that blood is out of your viscera, so your whole system is thrown off. Now, again, it's perfectly natural to go into that space for 5 minutes or so, right? Like Robert Sapolsky, a very wonderful, wonderful man, scientist, doctor, expert on stress. He has a great documentary called Stress, the Silent Killer, I believe it's called. It was on PBS. You can probably find it on YouTube. Free. Awesome. And he has a great way of describing this. And he goes to Africa every year and studies monkeys and their cortisol levels. Like, he's really, really intense. And he's got fascinating things to tell you about it, too. And he also talks about his own stress, which is really fascinating. But anyway, is this beautiful way of describing the stress in the terms of a gazelle running from a cheetah, right? He says that in 3 minutes, either the threat is over because the cheetah found another gazelle, or the gazelle is over. But at no time does the stress last more than 3 minutes. After the cheetah either gets another gazelle, and now this gazelle that we're talking about can now go into that rest and digest and reproduce mode of its nervous system. Because it has a vagus nerve just like you, by the way. All mammals. This applies to every mammal on the planet. We all are working with the same system, which is just phenomenally beautiful. Which tells you also that the one thing that's different is our industrialization, right? And it is our industrialization that causes such havoc on our nervous system. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different day, and we'll get into that sometime, right? But the idea, though, that I want to talk to you now is how, as I talked to you yesterday, right, that when we experience something that is a negative experience, a disappointment on some level, a conflict of any kind, just like a 22-year-old kid at a skating rink, right? Like, in that moment, I experienced a hardship, right? It's a small hardship, but it's a hardship, right? Now, in that hardship, I have two choices, right? I can approach that with, anger and resentment and stress, right? Because that's what that is. If I look at that person as somebody who did something wrong to me, if I judge her actions as bad, then I go into the stress response. That's the way it works. Because there's a part of my brain that's listening to those thoughts, and it's saying, hold on a second, this is scary. I better turn on the cortisol and adrenaline. Otherwise, we're going to be caught, with our pants down here, flat-footed. I'm not going to do that, not on my watch. And my brain's lookout is very, very good at that. Very, very good at that. It's been trained through trauma, right? So it's hypervigilant, right? So I'm always going to be near that space. Right. And so that's where it's important to recognize, again, that I can go into that with that sense of anger and disappointment and oh, this shouldn't be this. It's not fair. And I deserve better. Right. I can do all that. And when I do, I'm going into the stress response. There's no way around it. There's no way around that. Now, how much of the stress response, that's subjective and individual. But for me, it's always pretty heavy. Right, it can escalate very quickly, like the Will Ferrell. Wow, that escalated quickly. It can go from high to floose jag, as I said yesterday, with some 17-year-old kid in a matter of seconds. And then, of course, there's the ancillary emotions that come from that, right? Because at a certain point, I feel, and I think I said this yesterday, but at a certain point, I come down from it and I'm left with just the memory and the evaluation of what just happened an hour ago, yesterday, a week ago, whatever it is, whenever it is that I come to my senses, as it were, right? And then when I look back and I think about how I yelled at this little kid, what am I left with? I'm left with guilt and shame and self-flagellation, which is gonna cause more stress. So it's like a gazelle that just lives its entire life being chased by a cheetah. There is no animal that could survive that. So alternatively then, right, what could I do? As I talked about yesterday, I can approach it with kindness and compassion and empathy. I can say that this girl's sitting here, she's doing her best. She didn't mean to mess up my skates. And even if she did so because she thought that's what she needed to do. And again, it's not for her necessarily that I'm being kind. It's also for me that I'm being kind. Because if I can be kind and look at it as something that is just a mutual kind of experience that we're having, like, hey, we're both back here, talking about my skates again. I'm sure you don't enjoy this any more than I do. I'm sure you want me to be gone with my skates, right? And if I look at it from that kind of way, well, then there's no reason for my body to go into stress. So instead, I stay in that social engagement mode. And then if I turn around and there's somebody behind me online who could turn out to be my next best friend, right? You never know when the opportunities are going to come. And that's why we got to be ready for them. So again, it's not about staying away from stress, but it's treating stress for what it should be. And anytime stress lasts for more than 5 minutes or so, it's not appropriate stress in that moment. Okay, so that can be your guide. So anyway, let's talk about forgiveness, right? Because what we talked about before was acceptance, right? Which is, again, that's part of it, right? Kindness is a form of acceptance, right? Or acceptance allows for kindness to happen, right? Because if I accept that this is the suchness of this situation at the edge, the ironically named Edge Ice Arena, because I can't get an edge on my skates after 2 tries, right? But if I look at it as just this is the suchness, right? This is what has happened. I don't have to like it. I don't have to advocate it. I don't have to ultimately accept it, right? I can approach the girl and say, I'm not living with this. I paid you to sharpen my skates. I need them sharpened, right? Like all that can still happen. But if I can do all that from that place of acceptance in the present moment, acceptance of the suchness of this present moment, well, then the creative ideas come to me. How can I most effectively do this? Introducing myself to the girl, getting her name, calling her by her name, making sure that she gets back into that social engagement mode too, so that she can actually hear what I'm saying, right? Because maybe she was nervous yesterday when I said it and she just didn't understand. And that's okay. Now, this is where we come to forgiveness, right? Because sometimes it feels too hard, right? Like we just can't be kind. It's like, no, mad, right? So forgiveness is really the ultimate level of acceptance, right? That's what it is. There's nothing more than that. Right? So when I really accept the suchness of someone's actions, well, forgiveness is right there, right? I don't have to go to anything else, right? Forgiveness just arises. It's like, okay, I accept what happened, right? Now, let's talk for a moment about, let's define forgiveness a little bit, okay? Take a step back here, right? Because a lot of people consider forgiveness, and I know I've talked about this here before, so pardon me for the repeat, but I think this is an important message and an important lesson that maybe all of us could use to learn more than once, right? Forgiveness often feels like or becomes conflated with acquiescence, right? Or approval, or I'm trying to think of the word that I usually use. It's not coming to me, but anyway, granting license to someone, right? That kind of thing. Right? That's how we usually think of forgiveness, right? And furthermore, in that sort of mind space, right, we tend to think that forgiveness or the process of forgiveness includes reaching out to the person who we forgive, right? Burying the hatchet, moving the relationship forward, right? Now, let me be very clear. In that space of forgiveness, pardon me, let's turn on my fan here. It's getting a little warm down here in the basement. In that space of forgiveness, right, you then have the agency and the control and the license to reach out to that person. If that's what you feel is appropriate and is the wise choice for you and for that person, to reach out, bury the hatchet, move on, repair the relationship, well, then do that. I mean, I'm not telling you don't do that. But what I'm here to say, very importantly, is that forgiveness never, ever requires that of you. It doesn't. Forgiveness is something that we do internally, purely internally. Like so far internally that it's got nothing to do with the outside world on a certain level, right? Because again, forgiveness is acceptance. As Jack Kornfield puts it, forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. Right? That's the acceptance, right? What's happened has happened. You cannot go back. You can't be Superman and fly around the earth the wrong way until the earth spins backwards and Lois Lane comes back to life and you can save her, right? You cannot do that. That is fiction. It does not happen that way. And an event or a decision or an experience is in the past, and therefore it is no longer a real thing. There is no going back to it. All you have is right now. Okay? So forgiveness is about putting down the burden of the resentment and the anger and the feeling of vengeance. Some evening of some score that you believe you are responsible to do. It's putting all of that down and saying, I'm not going to carry this anymore. I'm not going to let my resentment, my anger, my whatever, my unforgiveness, I'm not going to let that impact the rest of my life. I'm not going to let it take away my time from my family. I'm not going to let it take time from my own joy. I'm going to set a boundary. And that boundary comes with forgiveness. So let me tell you about this doctor really quick, because this is a fascinating story. So this doctor, I don't remember his name. I got to look him up because I tell this story so often. It would be really nice to give the guy's name. And who knows, maybe I'll meet him someday. But anyways, a doctor in New Orleans who works in the burn unit, right? I guess he's like the head of the burn unit down there in a hospital in New Orleans. Now, a specific thing about burn unit, right, or burn injuries, right, is that there's always somebody at fault. Right? It's never just a fluke, right? Or almost never, right? It's always like a safety precaution wasn't in place, or a stupid mistake happened and we blame ourselves, or, there was some reason, some culpability, right? And that's very common to burn injuries, okay? Unlike car injuries, right? Like a car crash can just happen. It was nobody's fault. Nobody knew. It just happened, right? That's not true with burns, right? Burns are almost always there's somebody who is culpable. Okay. And so this doctor, realizing that, and very wisely realizing that, what he did was he worked with his patients over the course of a couple of years, hundreds of patients, right? Now, it's not really a scientific study because he didn't have a control group and he didn't replicate it and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't reviewed by peers because it wasn't a real experiment, right? And so you can't call it science, but it is a really impressive anecdotal observation, okay? And certainly something that could be a hypothesis for somebody else to go and perform some science around it. And I'm sure that the science would hold true, right? At least that's my feeling based on what I'm understanding. So anyway, what this doctor did was he met with each of his patients who came into the burn ward, right? And he tells them about, okay, this is the situation. This is where you're at. This is what's happening in your body. This is your prognosis and the treatment in front of you. And this is what we're looking at. Okay. And after reviewing all of that, he asked them very specifically, he said, I want you to see if you can even just think of forgiving the person who did this, or even if that person is yourself, right? Now, specifically, and this is really important, okay, really important, please understand this. The doctor very specifically, very clearly told each of these patients, forgiving them does not mean that you drop your lawsuit against them. It does not mean that you drop the criminal charges against them. Okay, you still pursue all of that. It does not mean that you have to go and work for that person again, or that you have to have that person in your life in any way, shape, or form. You are free and welcome to cut them off on any level you want. But first forgive, which really what he was saying. And I would love to talk to the guy and find out if he knew this, but really what he's saying in that moment is accept what's happened, right? But here's what he found, right? And again, over hundreds of patients, right? This wasn't just like 2 or 3 people, it was hundreds of patients. He found that the people who were unwilling to forgive, who held that grudge, that those people required an average of 4 additional skin grafts, or 3, it's a 4-to-1 ratio, right? That their body rejected the skin grafts to repair their burn 4-to-1 against the people who are willing to forgive. Now, why is that, right? It's not spiritual. It's not woo-woo. It's cortisol and adrenaline. That's what it is, right? Because remember, when just like fear, right, or just like just like anger, right, that when we experience unforgiveness, right, when we are holding a grudge against somebody and saying, no, I will not forgive them for what they did to me, right, what happens is that's a sense of fear and anger, and that is going to produce that same cortisol stress response in your body, right? Just like a gazelle running away from a cheetah. It's no different in that moment. But here's the thing. You have 65,000 thoughts every single day, right? So to say that if something was on your mind and somebody did something that hurt you and you're not forgiving that person, you're holding a grudge against them. Well, first of all, holding the grudge alone is going to make you think about that person more often than if you were to forgive them, right? But what's really important is that, out of 65,000 thoughts, how many times do you think about this person? To say 30 or 40 times is like simple, like that's easy, right? So every time you think of that person, you go into that stress response. Your blood leaves your viscera, your cortisol and adrenaline are flooding and rushing through your body. Your heart rate is increasing. Your blood pressure is increasing. Your respiratory is becoming very shallow and quick. You're almost in a hyperventilation. Like ultimately, it goes to hyperventilation, right? Your immune system, your endocrine system, your lymphatic system, your digestive system. All of those things are like offline or like operating in a weird way, which is why people who experience chronic stress, often very overweight, often result in autoimmune diseases because their immune system is constantly attacking itself for years and years and years, and it burns out. That's what happened to my mother. She has Parkinson's disease. It's because of her stress. 100% because of her stress. I know it. I don't care what any doctor tells me. I know that I'll find doctors who agree, like Dr. Mate, So anyway, not to get diverted there, but anyway, so if you think about a person, say 30 times during a day, and all 30 of those times you're going into that stress response, right? But you're sitting at your desk trying to get work done, right? So that's what forgiveness is about, right? Forgiveness is about, I'm not going to let you do that to me anymore. Right? So through the acceptance of forgiveness, we actually set the perfect boundary. And as I said on TikTok this morning, which is funny because I just put it out there to see what comments came back, and one did, and I got to answer it. But the thing is, like what I did on TikTok this morning, I said, okay, I have an unpopular opinion. That's a thing on TikTok. You give an unpopular opinion, I said, I have an unpopular opinion. Forgiveness is the most effective form of revenge. Because that's the thing, right? If somebody did something wrong to you, the most effective thing you can do to get back at them on some level is to show them that it doesn't hurt you anymore. To show them that you are living your life, you are in your joy, and they do not have that power over you. But ultimately, and this was the thing that people didn't necessarily realize, because everybody's like, yeah, the best revenge is living well and stuff like that, but really the truth is that once you forgive, you realize that there's no revenge. You realize that that's just a silly concept and that it does no good to anybody. Like the Buddha said, anger is like carrying a hot coal that you're planning to throw at somebody. Mark Twain said, anger is an acid that does more damage to the vessel in which it is stored than the person on whom it is poured. So you realize very soon that vengeance is just that. It's like an acid. And I do not need it. And that's why they say, like, even if you were going to like kind of engage in that idea of vengeance, you know, they say, what's the saying, right? Vengeance is a dish best served cold, right? Like, do it cognitively, do it effectively, right? And what's the best vengeance is to show somebody that it just doesn't matter to you. You are free from it. And again, you'll come to the idea that understanding that there's no reason to hurt anybody, right? But in the meantime, you know, understand that if it is somebody who's still actively upset with you, nothing's going to upset them more than seeing that you are not impacted by their being upset with you, right? So it's like a bully, you know? Like, what's the best thing to do to a bully is just ignore him. Pretend it doesn't matter. And after they get done being really angry, they're just going to stop. So remember, you know, it is always your choice to reach out to the person and to say, hey, you know, this was silly. Let's get over this. Come on. You know, let's talk about this. I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. Let's move on because we have a great relationship here and we should repair this. Okay. That is always something that should be a potential, but it's never something that should feel required. And even if that's somebody who's very close to you. Like a lot of you understand that I've now, you know, completely dissociated myself from my parents. Like I'm not in touch with them anymore. That's the decision that I had to make. I didn't make it to be mad at them. I didn't make it to hurt them. I did it because that's what I need. I need to have some separation. But I've come to that understanding of needing that separation through the forgiveness. It was only when I had that clarity to realize, like, wait a minute, I cannot heal from this trauma by continuing to expose myself to the people who caused the trauma. It's just not going to work. I never would have realized that without that clarity. And the clarity, the regulation, the social engagement phase of my nervous system was brought about by the forgiveness. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed this today. I did. Real quick, though, reminder, tomorrow, Loving Kindness workshop at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time. I'm going to put the link in the description. All right? All right. Thanks, everybody. I wish you well. Take care.